welcome to Hardtalk India. The much-awaited Vajpayee-Musharraf summit seems to have ended in an impasse. So does that mean it failed, or did it in fact achieve something? With me to discuss the outcome of the summit as well as the future of Indo-Pakistan relations is India's Minister of Law, Arun Jaitley. Mr. Jaitley, 3 days after the summit has ended, what is your government's considered assessment of its outcome?
Well, in some measure, the summit was a movement forward in Indo-Pak relationship. The relationship had been frozen on account of post-Kargil developments. The positive outcome was that the two heads of government started speaking to each other. They interacted in detail. They got an opportunity to even understand each other's position. There is an understanding to meet in future. That itself is, in some measure, if not a very large measure, a movement forward. It's a different matter that we could not agree on the final language, draft and spirit of the declaration that had to be signed.
I want to go into that in some measure of detail later on, but let me first say to you, back in May when you extended the invitation to President Musharraf, what were your government's hopes and expectations of the forthcoming summit?
It would have been a far happier occasion if we had agreed on a consent statement or a consent declaration. But the fact that we could not itself doesn't really dampen the hopes which we had when the invitation was extended, because senior functionaries in the government had been saying that don't expect any miracle from the first meeting. In fact, that's the exact statement which was made. It was really intended to defreeze the relationship which for the last 2 years had been frozen, and to start talking to each other and to try and see if in the totality of relationships there are some issues which we could resolve and move forward further. We would have preferred that even if there were conflicting positions on certain issues, there were several others in which, if we had dealt with them independently in the totality of relationship, we could have moved forward.
Let me put it like this. The Indian government's official position is that the summit end was a disappointment. The Pakistani government's position is that considerable and valuable progress was made. The Indian Foreign Minister has said that obstacles were created by the policies and attitudes of the Pakistanis. The Pakistani Foreign Minister has said that there was a meeting of minds and that there was shared vision. Those are not just opposite views, they're confusing. Who do we believe?
Well, if his understanding is that the shared vision was on peace and security in the region, perhaps that's a vision for the future. But if his shared vision is that cross-border terrorism is synonymous with some kind of an agitation going on in the valley, well, that's not a shared vision.
Let me put it like this. Was there a meeting of minds at any point between Prime Minister Vajpayee and President Musharraf?
I would not be in a position to actually give a conclusive reply to this, but on the subject matter of the agreement, perhaps there were areas of difference.
Was there considerable progress made, therefore? Because that's another statement made by the Pakistan Foreign Minister.
Well, I have heard those statements, and let me straight away come to the issues. The proposed draft which was being discussed never ended in a document of agreement. It was a disagreed document. It was a document of disagreement on at least the crucial issues involved. And therefore to say that considerable progress is made on those crucial terms may perhaps not be a fair assessment.
Is he therefore mistaken, or is he in fact misleading?
Well, that's a question which really should be addressed to him.
But you have an opinion. After all, he's talking about a meeting with your Prime Minister. He's commenting on it.
Well, I would not, because our stand now very clearly is, and the stand which has already been suggested by the Ministry of External Affairs, that as far as the crucial issues were concerned, we could not agree on those crucial issues, and therefore to refer to a document which we could not agree upon as any basis for a future dialogue perhaps may not be appropriate.
It also follows that if you could not agree on crucial issues, clearly you did not make considerable progress.
Well, if there had been considerable progress on those crucial issues, perhaps the world would have seen a document.
In which case it's very clear that the Pakistan Foreign Minister, at least in your opinion, is mistaken, if not misleading.
Well, I would not like to choose those phrases, and I would leave it to you to make an assessment of that.
Let's look at some of the other statements made by the Pakistan Foreign Minister after his return to Islamabad. He said that at least at 2 points, a draft declaration was agreed by Mr. Jaswant Singh, but it was then overruled by his cabinet colleagues. Is that correct?
Well, I have checked this up with the Foreign Minister. I have also checked it up with the officials, and I have been given to understand that this statement is highly inaccurate, to say the least.
Highly inaccurate. Is it in fact a lie?
Well, I don't think we should go on choosing phraseology which may not be appropriate in the current situation, but certainly phrases such as that the statement is not accurate, it does not reflect the correct position that took place there, is what I have been instructed to say.
The reason I ask is because, in fact, Pakistani sources are going considerably further. They're also suggesting that both Foreign Minister Jaswant Singh and Prime Minister Vajpayee were not only happy with the two draft declarations but ready to sign it, but a hidden hand, as they call it, intervened and aborted an agreement. And they're suggesting that hidden hand is Home Minister L.K. Advani.
Well, I think we should leave it to the Pakistanis how they administer their own delegation and country. And how our affairs are settled should be best left to the Indian government. There was absolutely no disagreement between any member of the Indian team. There was never an agreement on the draft agreement, and therefore the question of any agreed or a possibly agreed draft being disagreed by a member of the Indian team does not arise.
They've also gone so far as to suggest that substantial portions of the second draft agreement were actually corrected and initialed in the handwriting of Foreign Minister Jaswant Singh, that he indicated to them that he would come back in 5 or 10 minutes.
I think you should address this question to Mr. Jaswant Singh, but from what I have been told, this entire talk of a draft itself is not in consonance with appropriate diplomacy, for the reason, what is discussed inside, you never make it public. If there is a document we can't agree upon, you never try and use that document as a possible document which could have emerged. If it was a document which had been agreed upon, it's a document which both countries then will be bound by. But if it is a document on which the discussions actually did not proceed further, I would say it was a document which was in disagreement.
All of that is completely fair, but are you contradicting their point, which is that Jaswant Singh and possibly Vajpayee agreed on a draft declaration which then other members, possibly Mr. Advani, overturned?
Well, the phrase which was given to me by the External Affairs Ministry when I checked this up, that such a suggestion is absurd.
Let me come to another statement made by the Pakistan Foreign Minister on his return to Islamabad. He says that in fact the two sides were agreed on everything except for one paragraph, and that was a paragraph which spoke about, and I'll quote, how progress towards settlement of the Kashmir issue will be conducive to normalization of relations. What was your objection to that sentence?
Well, may I just say this? Instead of hair-splitting the words, let us go to the core area of difference. The core area of difference really is that any document which refers to Kashmir as the centrality of the issue, the Kashmir as the central issue, and therefore links up issues such as cross-border terrorism with the Kashmir issue, is not acceptable to India. That's the Indian position. Therefore, whichever way the drafts are made, unless we have clearly said we are willing to discuss the issue of Kashmir, we don't regard Kashmir as a dispute, we don't regard Kashmir as an issue which is central to the relationship, and therefore the issue of cross-border terrorism is completely independent of that. That's the Indian position. Our second position is, in the totality of relationship, there are several issues in the Indo-Pak relationship which can take the relationship further, and therefore even if there are areas of disagreement, there could be some other areas of agreement.
This is why you believe that settlement of the Kashmir issue will be conducive to normalization of relations is the wrong formulation, because you believe other settlements of other issues could be conducive to normalization as well, not just Kashmir alone.
We are willing for a discussion on the Kashmir issue. There is nothing on the Kashmir issue except the POK issue, which from the Indian point of view requires a settlement.
Let me put it like this. If you were to ask any Indian on the street, man or woman, what he thinks is the essential problem between India and Pakistan, he's bound to say Kashmir. In fact, 78% of people who voted in a Times of India net poll said Kashmir. And if you were to then ask them whether settlement of the Kashmir issue would pave the way for normalization of relations, again they would say yes. If the people of India can accept this, why can't the government accept it?
But the people of India accept Kashmir as an important issue for two reasons. A, the issue in Kashmir is Pakistan's inability to accept Kashmir as an integral part of India. And B, the cross-border terrorism which creates a situation of uncertainty and upheaval in Kashmir.
Absolutely.
So that is why the people of India consider Kashmir an issue.
Absolutely.
Not because Kashmir, the future of Kashmir in terms of territory has to be decided with.
Mr. Jaitley, all you're saying is that the people of India and the government of Pakistan have different reasons for considering Kashmir the main issue. But if they both consider it the main issue, why doesn't the government of India also consider that?
May I say this? The people of India have never said that we consider Kashmir as the main issue. They have actually believed, and you can actually ask those 78% of people who believe Kashmir is an issue, that Kashmir is an issue because of Pakistani reasons, that is the inability to accept and the cross-border terrorism, not because of any Indian factor in Kashmir is Kashmir an issue. And that is why we are willing to discuss Kashmir, but to dictate the agenda and say, well, only if there is a centrality attached to Kashmir, and everything else, including killings of a large number of innocent people through cross-border terrorism, is linked to Kashmir, is unacceptable.
But it seems to me that all you're saying is a very simple thing. We may differ about what aspect of Kashmir is important, but the fact that Kashmir is the main issue is something that both sides agree on. Why can't you then agree to put that into the formulation?
But Kashmir as a part of the agenda is always acceptable to India. But Kashmir as a part, to have a unifocal image of Kashmir, or to have some kind of an issue that or a tunnel vision that Kashmir is the only issue and everything else centers around Kashmir, is not acceptable to India.
We all heard President Musharraf. He never once said that Kashmir is the only issue. He repeatedly said that there are other issues that should be discussed in tandem. His point, which he's repeated so often that most of the people know it almost by heart, is that Kashmir is the main issue. In fact, he even backed off the term core to main.
But once we discuss Kashmir, we get an opportunity to understand each other's position in Kashmir, is a situation which is perfectly acceptable to India. We may not accept the Pakistani stand, but should we halt the progress on every other issue merely because we have differing visions on Kashmir and we are not likely to have a common vision in Kashmir?
But again, you're misrepresenting President Musharraf's views as were heard by most people in this country, because he did not say make progress on other issues hostage to progress on the Kashmir issue. He said let there be progress on both in tandem.
The Kashmir issue or the issue of terrorism, as our foreign minister says, cannot really hold the rest of the relationship to hostage. Well, that's a difference in perception that the two countries have.
And at that difference of perception, a virtual impasse or breakdown happened.
Well, I would not call it a breakdown. I won't call it a dead end. Certainly on the draft document there was a deadlock. But then the fact that you have spoken, you have understood each other's position, you agreed to meet in future, is itself a progress. It may be a progress in a small measure.
Let me bring up something else that Hardtalk India has been informed about. Apparently, the two draft declarations contained no reference whatsoever to the Charter of the United Nations, to United Nations resolutions, or to settlement of the Kashmir issue in accordance with the wishes of the people of Kashmir. Can you confirm that there were no references to any of those?
I think it is improper to refer to documents which are not agreed upon, documents which are only drafts for discussion, and it is further not very desirable to discuss what transpired inside and make everything public. In any case, authentically, I would not be in a position to even make a comment because I was not a part of the summit.
Except for one very important fact, that if it is the case that there were no such references in any of the draft declarations, then to many people that would look as if Pakistan took one significant step away from its previous commitment to plebiscites and referenda. And that would be a victory for India.
Even without referring to the document, because the document is not an agreed document, the fact that things like plebiscite, United Nations resolutions have not come up for any significant reference.
No reference at all.
No reference at all. I think is a positive development. As a part of the talks, there is some understanding of India's position.
So, so now you do believe that there was a positive outcome in this instance?
Correct. We have consistently maintained it was not a failure. I won't say it was an overwhelming success, but it was certainly a positive movement forward, and positive movement forward in terms of certain nuances, in terms of the fact that we are discussing.
Let me put it like this. Many people will turn around and say, because of the Indian government's allergy to having Kashmir described as the main issue, which for many people is not important, they've actually lost something, which is Pakistan resigning from plebiscites and referenda, which would have been important.
May I, Karan, say this? It is perhaps incorrect to understand or to presume that it was because of this centrality of Kashmir issue alone. There are three reasons which are given. Reason one, you have to pick up threads from Lahore and Simla. Reason two, cross-border terrorism. In fact, in today's civilized world, any country saying that cross-border terrorism must come to an end should perhaps be the beginning point. It can't be something for which we have to struggle to achieve it. And third, it is the centrality of Kashmir issue. And I don't think these are issues on which India would be in a position to actually give up its stand.
All right, the Prime Minister has accepted President Musharraf's invitation to go to Islamabad. When will he undertake that journey?
Well, I think that will depend upon the time schedule of the Prime Minister itself.
Will it happen this year?
Well, I really won't, we can't bind it down in terms of calendar. It's a fact which the Prime Minister would decide on basis of his calendar and conveniences in mutual consultation with both the countries. But the fact that...
But it could happen this year.
Well, I would not know the exact month, therefore I don't think I should comment on it. But the fact that the Prime Minister has accepted the invitation, I think itself adds to the further positive movement itself.
Except for one other development. On Tuesday, the morning after the summit ended, your foreign minister publicly said, and you used those words a moment ago yourself, that India would seek to pick up the threads. However, on Wednesday night, the official Indian spokesman said that at any future meeting, the understanding would begin from scratch. Now, are you contradicting yourself? Or
Well,
is there
I
confusion?
don't think we are fairly quoting the official spokesperson. The understanding would begin from the two agreed documents, the Simla Agreement and the Lahore document. The understanding would not be on basis of a document which was not agreed upon.
If you wish and insist upon an understanding beginning in terms of Lahore and Simla documents, which we know that the President of Pakistan has reservations about, then what do you say if he turns around and says, fine, date back your understandings right the way back to the UN resolutions, which, as you've now almost accepted, he moved away from in the Agra Declaration?
It would not be fair for anybody to suggest that one particular head of government or state is not bound by the commitment which the nation has made in the past. These are national commitments. Merely because governments change, you don't write off those commitments. Mr. Vajpayee was critical at the time.
Is not the UN resolution which you think is outdated a commitment made by
I'll make a
governments in the
comment.
past?
I'll make a comment on the UN resolution. Mr. Vajpayee was critical of the Simla Agreement. Today he stands by it because that's an agreement entered by an Indian head of government. As far as the United Nations resolution is concerned, I would have a few things to say on it. The United Nations Secretary General himself has said that it has become irrelevant. There were other components of the UN resolution which Pakistan for 50 years and more has defied. As far as the wishes of the Indian people or the Kashmiri people is concerned, you had in Kashmir an elected constituent assembly subsequent to the resolution which drafted the constitution and accepted Kashmir to be a part of India. You've had election after election where the will of the people has been shown. Your most recent election is the Panchayat election in which 70 to 80% people have polled.
Maybe, and maybe your logic is in fact impeachable or unimpeachable, as different people may argue. But there's a danger in the game you're playing. Pakistan says, give up Lahore and Simla. We in turn will give up our carrying on and adhering to the UN resolutions. You gain from that. You gain from that something that is invaluable.
We gain from the fact that something which has become irrelevant is being given up. But we don't gain from something which is the basis from where you have to pick up the threads by giving those up. The UN resolution is virtually irrelevant in today's context. The UN itself has said so. So we are not really much concerned today about the UN resolution. But the basis of agreement, how can an agreement, because of domestic compulsions of Pakistani politics, the Simla and the Lahore agreement be given up?
Okay, let's come to some of the criticisms that have been made both in the press and by the opposition about the nature of the summit that you held. You've been widely criticized for holding a summit without a formal, structured agenda. Even your foreign minister has said that his initial preference was for a different sort of summit. Well, why then did he agree to this without structure?
The government, a summit is a bilateral exercise. The government of India's preference clearly was for a structured agenda. A structured agenda would have put several items on the agenda where Kashmir would be an agenda. Pakistan's insistence on there not being a structured agenda, they may have their own reasons for it, which we can now understand. And therefore, the two heads of government would discuss and their discussions would lead to an agenda, was the reason why there could not be a structured agenda.
No, but surely this was good.
May I say this? My government was criticized for not having a bilateral dialogue with Pakistan. It was criticized on several occasions by opposition parties. It is the same parties whose statements I have read today, which now turn around and say, you could have postponed it. Well, you had to make a movement further. We would have been happier with a structured agenda, But we had to
But
make a
don't you
movement
see
further.
the danger of what you've done? By not postponing the summit till you had a structured agenda, by not insisting that a structured agenda was the only way of, let me finish. By not insisting that a structured agenda was the only way of ensuring success, you've had a summit, no doubt, you've had bilateral talks, no doubt, but you've had them on General Musharraf's terms.
I would not say so. Because some of the Indian press people heard General Musharraf, they've also heard the Indian stance. It is the Indian stance, except that the Indian stance was during the summit not being given in that manner to the media, but within the summit, the insistence on including clauses like cross-border terrorism was an Indian stance.
The charge from the opposition is that General Musharraf had his way and that he took the government of India for a ride.
Well, I would not say so. If the government of India had been taken for a ride, you would have had an agreement which the government with the Indian people would have perhaps regretted. The government of India insisted on watching Indian interests, in protecting Indian interests, and therefore prevented anybody from taking anybody for a ride.
All right, the summit was in fact your government's first proper opportunity to meet with and to size up the general. How did you find him?
Well, I think on a personal level, there are no criticisms involved. There were excellent meetings. He had a good rapport with the Indian media. He had a good rapport with the Indian people. He was extended all the courtesies which are due to a head of state, a head of government. And I don't think on that level anybody in India would like even to make the slightest of complaints.
Let's move beyond the personal level. Let me ask you what to many is a critical question. Did he look to you like a man you can trust?
He is the Pakistani head of state. It is the policy of government of India that we don't decide who represents the other side.
Although to be fair, you've tweeted about that in the past, but let's leave that aside.
We have today a situation where we disagree with some visions that he or his government or his people may have. But at the same time, if we have decided to talk to a foreign state, we have to trust whoever represents the country.
You're saying you have to trust him. Does that suggest that you may not want to, but you have no choice in the matter?
Well, I think this is a matter of formal protocol. Once you invite a foreign head of state, you cannot say, I'm inviting you, but I don't trust you. The fact that you are discussing with them, you are trying to smoothen the relationship between the two countries. Whichever is the government of the state is a government you have to negotiate with.
Now, the Prime Minister spent a lot of time with General Musharraf, perhaps as much as 8-9 hours in one-to-one contact, some of it without even note-takers present. Did the two of them establish a rapport?
Well, I have only media reports which suggest that. And
Did the Prime Minister not confide in his cabinet, of which you're a senior member?
I think the Prime Minister discusses issues of foreign policy and strategic interests with the cabinet. The personal factors are issues which don't figure in our discussion.
I don't mean the personal factors in the sense of did they become friends, but did they feel that they understood each other? Did they feel as if they were being sincere with each other?
Certainly, the Prime Minister and General Musharraf got an opportunity to understand each other's point of view. They may have agreed on some and disagreed on the others.
But the Prime Minister then did feel that General Musharraf was being sincere. It wasn't a political gimmick that he was indulging in, as some of your cabinet colleagues seem to be suggesting.
Well, may I say so, at a time when we have started negotiations, we have started discussions, when we want to carry it further, I think making individual assessments may not be appropriate and may not be necessary in the circumstances.
So those members of your cabinet who are your colleagues who have gone so far as to suggest that this was a political gimmick on the part of Pakistan are speaking out of turn.
Well, I am not aware of any cabinet proceeding where any member said this. I do not know where you get it from.
This was, of course, the first summit held between India and Pakistan under the glare, not just of the international media, but the glare of the Indian media. Looking back on it, do you think your government could have handled the media more astutely and perhaps been more forthright and forthcoming?
Well, I won't give you a definitive answer on this, but I'll say there are 2 points of view. The first point of view is that a summit which is intended to defreeze the relationship is like a retreat. The two heads of state, the two delegations discuss at length, they may agree, they may not agree. You can't have a retreat with 1,000 people wanting to know every minute what is going on.
But you could have stopped them from coming.
Well, may I just say that that's one view. The second view is, in today's world of electronic media and the era of media that we live in, perhaps you cannot stop the media and retreats of this kind may not be possible.
Then in which case, can I interrupt
in which situation, I find a very interesting comment made in some quarters. Well, the Pakistanis, or that's what is being said, I can't confirm it, were always providing us the inside information, even if it was slanted, even if it was inaccurate. Why didn't you do it? The External Affairs Minister has answered it. India has not been carrying on its diplomacy through the media. We do it in the bilateral talks.
You reacted very strongly to General Musharraf's meeting with newspaper editors, many of whom, by the way, were very impressed with him. What were you objecting to, the content or the fact that he arranged for it to be broadcast?
Well, may I say this, as a part of a protocol, if a particular meeting with the editors has been fixed, the meeting has been fixed, and therefore the telecast of that at a time when the summit is going on may have an adverse effect of diluting the environment of goodwill which is being built up.
Did it derail the summit very quickly?
Well, certainly it did adversely affect upon the environment which was being built up. Whether it derailed or not, I can't say, because to say that media agendas will derail a summit may not be entirely accurate, but it certainly did create an adverse circumstance.
Arun Jaitley, there we're going to have to leave it. Thank you very much for talking to Hard Talk India.
Thank you, Karan.